Nashville, Tennessee, country music capital of the world, home of the Grand Ole Opry, where singers and dreamers come seeking stardom. Join me as we learn about the lives and careers of those who built this town on Classic Country Backstories. Hello, friends, and welcome to Classic Country Backstories. I'm Colleen Gallagher. Today, we're going to learn about the life and career of Hawkshaw Hawkins. I was fortunate enough to catch up with his son, Hawkshaw Hawkins Jr., and talk to him during my research of his father's life. Come with me on this journey. You might just learn something. Born Harold Franklin Hawkins on December 22, 1921, in Huntington, West Virginia. He was the only boy with three sisters, Lena, Leona, and Betty. Harold was given his name Hawkshaw as a boy. A neighbor dubbed him Hawkshaw from a comic strip character, Hawkshaw the Detective, after Harold helped the neighbor track down two missing fishing rods that were apparently stolen. Harold later went on to use this as his stage name. Hawkshaw grew to be an imposing figure on stage at 6 feet 6 inches. Because of his size and his outgoing stage presence, he was tagged 11.5 yards of personality. He was known for his rich, robust baritone voice. At age 13, young Harold reportedly traded 5 rabbits for a homemade guitar and taught himself how to play. He was first heard on WCMI radio out of Ashland, Kentucky, at around the age of 16. He went on to win a talent contest and a job on WSAZ-AM in Huntington, where he formed Hawkshaw and Sherlock with Clarence Jack. They moved to WCHS-AM in Charleston, West Virginia in the late 30s. In 1940, Harold, while still a young man of 19, married Reva Barber. In 1941, Hawkshaw and Sherlock went to Lawrence, Massachusetts to provide country music for a Wild West show. Hawkshaw used horses in the act and did bullwhip and rope tricks. The duo also performed comedy as well as music in their act. Harold entered into the U.S. Army in 1943. He served as an engineer and was stationed near Paris, Texas. He would sneak out with his friends on Friday and Saturday nights to perform at the local nightclubs. As staff sergeant, he was stationed in France. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge and earned 4 stars during his 15 months of duty. He also spent time in Manila, in the Philippines, and had a show there on WVTM. In 1946, Hawkshaw was discharged from the U.S. Army. He returned home and signed his first record deal with King Records in Cincinnati, Ohio. His first recordings were Pan Am and Doghouse Boogie, which were both top 10 country hits. He had a minor hit with a song that went on to become his signature tune, The Sunny Side of the Mountain. Other notable songs during this period were All We Have Meant to Each Other and The Way I Love You, released in July of 1946. Later that same year, Hawkshaw became a member of the world's original jamboree in Wheeling, West Virginia on WWVA. This station covered the entire northeast coast of the United States and the eastern half of Canada. Hawkshaw became enormously popular on this show. In May 1953, Hawkshaw left King Records and signed with RCA Victor. RCA had a much wider distribution, which put him into the national spotlight. Beginning in 1954, Hawkshaw was a regular performer on ABC Radio and TV's Ozark Country Jubilee, led by Red Foley in Springfield, Missouri. This is where he would meet his future wife, Jean Shepard. Hawkshaw Hawkins joined WSM's Grand Ole Opry in 1955. In 1958, Hawkshaw and Reva divorced. While recording at RCA Victor, Hawkshaw recorded many different styles of songs, such as slow country ballads to up-tempo numbers. The songs came from country and honky-tonk genres, as well as pop and R&B tunes. There was no distinctive style to be recognized as Hawkshaw Hawkins, since the songs were so diverse. However, you knew Hawkshaw Hawkins' voice when you heard it. In 1959, after little success, Hawkshaw left RCA Victor and joined Columbia Records. At this label, he recorded Soldier's Joy, which went to number 15 on the chart. On November 26, 1960, Hawkshaw Hawkins married country star and fellow Grand Ole Opry member Jean Shepard at the Forum Auditorium in Wichita, Kansas. Among the performers at the show that night were Tex Ritter, Carl Perkins, Moon Mulligan, and the Plainsman Quartet, among other performers. The wedding took place immediately after the performance as a surprise to the crowd that was still in attendance. Local KSIR radio station owner Nick Sanders was the MC, informing the audience what was occurring. After the ceremony was over, the happy couple invited the audience to sample the wedding cake and take the flowers and decorations home with them. Hawk and Jean continued touring together until Jean was 6 or 7 months pregnant with their first child. On December 7, 1961, their son Don Robin Hawkins was born. He was named after country stars Don Gibson and Marty Robbins, who were dear friends to Hawkshaw and Jean. Shortly after Donnie was born, Hawkshaw and Jean introduced him on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. Jean held Donnie in her arms while Hawk sang his first song. Then Hawk took little Donnie off stage while Jean sang. Jean returned to the road after 6 months maternity leave. Hawk was such a good daddy, as was told by Jean in her autobiography. In 1962, Hawkshaw Hawkins returned to King Records after little success on Columbia. During a 3-day period, Hawkshaw recorded the final 12 songs of his career and his life, including his biggest hit, Lonesome 77203. This song was written by Justin Tubb, son of country legend Ernest Tubb. On March 2, 1963, Hawkshaw Hawkins made his final Grand Ole Opry appearance. His last song that night was his newest release, Lonesome 77203, for which he got a standing ovation. On March 3, 1963, Hawkshaw, Cowboy Copas, and Patsy Cline flew to Kansas City in a 3-year-old Comanche 4-seater aircraft piloted by Randy Hughes, who was Cowboy Copas' son-in-law and manager to Patsy Cline. The entertainers were going to perform on 3 benefit concerts at the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall. The concerts were to help the family of radio disc jockey Cactus Jack Call, who had died in an automobile accident in January of 1963. Cactus Jack left behind a wife and 2 small children. He was a well-known and loved disc jockey in the Kansas City market. Along with Hawk, Patsy, and Copas, other entertainers on the show were Dottie West, George Jones, Wilma Lee and Stoney Cooper, and Billy Walker, among others. The performers put on 3 shows that day at the 3,500-seat theater. For the return flight home, Hawkshaw had a commercial airline ticket to fly back to Nashville, as his wife, Jean Shepard, was 8 months pregnant with their second child. Fellow entertainer Billy Walker received a call that his father was ill and that he needed to return home as soon as possible. Hawkshaw gladly gave his commercial seat to Billy Walker, and Hawk decided to fly home on Randy Hughes' plane with Cowboy Copas and Patsy Cline. On Monday, March 4th, the weather was too bad to fly. Therefore, Randy Hughes, Patsy Cline, Cowboy Copas, and Hawkshaw Hawkins were forced to spend another night in Kansas City. Around 2 p.m. on March 5, 1963, the small private plane left Fairfax Municipal Airport in Kansas City, Kansas, carrying Hawkshaw Hawkins, Cowboy Copas, and Patsy Cline. Hughes took off, operating on visual flight rules, the destination back to Nashville. The plane landed to refuel at Rogers Municipal Airport in Rogers, Arkansas, and then took off again 15 minutes later. Hughes later made contact with Dyersburg Airport in Dyersburg, Tennessee, and later landed at 5:05 p.m. He received a report from FAA that weather conditions were below VFR minima. This meant that flying a visual flight path was not recommended. After refueling, the pilot and the 3 passengers reboarded the Piper Comanche. He requested another weather report, which said there was a 500-foot ceiling with visibility of 5 miles, a gusty, turbulent wind of 20 miles per hour. After takeoff at 6:07 p.m., no further radio contact was made with the plane. Hawkshaw's wife, Jean Shepard, was at home with 15-month-old Donnie. According to Jean's autobiography, she gave Donnie a bath and put him to bed. She was concerned that Hawk was not home yet. She later received a phone call at 10:30 p.m. from Eileen Tate, a representative of Hawk's fan club, letting Jean know that the plane was missing. A witness that was approximately 4 miles from Camden, Tennessee, reported hearing a low-flying aircraft flying on a northerly course. The engine noise increased, and seconds later, a white light appeared from the overcast, descending at a 45-degree angle. At 6:29 p.m., the plane crashed into a wooded, swampy area 1 mile north of US 70. The witness described hearing a dull-sounding crash, followed by silence. The wreckage was found around 6 a.m. the next morning. There were no survivors. Harold Hawkshaw Hawkins was laid to rest March 8, 1963, at Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, in a section called Music Row. Across from him are Cowboy Copus and Randy Hughes. Patsy's body was returned to Winchester, Virginia, where she was buried at the Shenandoah Memorial Park in Winchester. Hawk and Jean's second son, Harold Franklin Hawkins Jr., was born April 8, 1963, just over a month after his father's passing. Lonesome 77203 hit the Billboard Country Chart March 2, 1963, just 3 days before Hawkshaw's death. Then it fell off the charts and was absent for 2 weeks. On March 23, 1963, Lonesome 77203 appeared on the charts, where it remained for 25 weeks, spending 4 weeks at the number 1 position, something that had eluded Hawk in his lifetime. The FAA's final conclusion was that the non-instrument rated pilot attempted visual flight in adverse weather conditions, resulting in disorientation and subsequent loss of control. Just outside of Camden, Tennessee, is marked with a stone marker dedicated July 6, 1996. Hawkshaw Hawkins was inducted into the West Virginia Hall of Fame in 2009. So let me ask you this. You were born on April 8th, 1963, right?
Yep.
Which was just a little over a month after your father passed away.
Yes, ma'am.
So how did you really get to know your father?
Mostly, my mom got remarried a couple years after. I wrote for Harlan Howard for a couple years, and Harlan and my daddy were best friends, and Harlan told me some stories which I probably shouldn't tell on tape, but Harlan told me a lot about my daddy. Don Gibson was a good friend of my father's, and he told me some stories, and Mama told me some stories up until she got remarried, and then all of a sudden all that changed.
Sure.
You know.
So you feel like you got a pretty good grip on what your dad was like?
Yeah, I do. I do. Well, me and my brother's always been a little wild and crazy, and I think Hawk had a little bit of that in him. Mama was more subdued, you know, let's get out of here type thing. Hawk was, I think, wanting to hang out and a little while.
He always seemed so charismatic. It's like, you know, I had told you before, I watched some of the Opry shows and the things that they have on TV now, the old clips of him doing the bullwhip tricks and all of that. And I could just tell that he was just a big guy, and he was a big personality. And they called him 11 and a half yards of personality. Is that not one of the things?
That was his nickname. They put that on his album, and that's what he's called. He's also called Hawk of the West Virginia Hills.
Wow.
And they called me last week. They're going to put a street up in his name. So I've got to go up there this summer, and they'll dedicate the street, and we'll cut the ribbon and all that on that. That's pretty cool.
And where will that be?
Huntington, West Virginia.
Huntington, that's right, because that's where he was from.
Yeah.
He did a Wild West show, correct?
Yes, yeah.
As part of that. And
he had a bus that kept catching on fire. Kept catching on fire. They'd be going down the road and the motor would catch on fire, and they'd spray it out and then go to a truck stop and get it all fixed, and then they'd get another 300 miles down the road and the thing would catch on fire. Have you been up to the site?
Yes, we've been there. We've been there a few times. We were there yesterday.
Were you?
Yeah.
Aww.
We took. So that's why I know you said you had performed over there.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you if you had been. Have you been to the memorial itself?
Oh yes, yeah. I were there when they made the rock, sculpted the rock, and everything. PM magazine came out, and it was me, Kitty Wells, my mother, Julie Dick, who was Apache's daughter. Let's see, Johnny Wright was there, but they did a big thing on us.
Well, now I know you're an incredible songwriter and singer yourself.
Thank you.
There's some great DNA there between your mom and your dad, and I know
I get it from the genes.
yeah, but you have that rich baritone sound, kind of like your
It's a
daddy
curse.
had.
It's a curse, I'm telling you. I'm one octave and one octave only.
Well, it sounds, the things that I've heard is just fabulous.
Well, thank you.
So tell the folks what are you up to these days?
Well, I mean, I'm a pipe fitter. I was a pipe fitter, union pipe fitter for 35 years, and I'm retired now. I help a lady that actually lives on the other side of that boat dock. I help take care of her. I've known her for 40-something years. Her name is Joy Ford. And once a year, we put on a Next Generation show.
Yes.
And me and Bob Lumen's daughter, and Robin Young, Farron Young, and Julie Husky, we started this thing, and it's grown and it's grown and it's grown. This is our 11th year doing it. Would be 13 if it wasn't for the corona.
Mm-hmm. That stopped a lot of
But
things.
we're sponsored by Springer Mountain Farms Chicken. I love you, Gus Arundel. And this year we've got Pam Tillis on the show. We've got Mel Tillis Jr. on the show. We got John Carter Cash is on the show.
Oh, that's great.
We've got the Bellamy Brothers kids are on the show. Waylon Jennings' grandson is on the show. Lynn Anderson's daughter is on the show. I think we have 13 acts this year. Sweepy D. Ford Bailey.
Wow.
The first entertainer ever to take the stage of the Grand Ole Opry was D. Ford Bailey. And we've got his grandson. Sweepy is a great harmonica player. We've got C. Thomas Howell, the actor. You know who that is?
Yes.
Pony
yes.
Boy, and he was in E.T. And we've got him coming. He's going to be a special guest, do a couple songs for us.
But you do this every year
Every
in
year.
June. It coincides with CMA Music Festival.
It's the show that starts off CMA.
I am so tickled that you all do that and that you carry on the tradition that your
We're just
families
trying to
have
keep
set.
our folks' music alive. We ain't making no money on it. You know, we're just trying to keep our parents' history alive. And
But you perform other than that? Do
Oh,
you do
yes.
that? You do.
Oh,
You
yes.
travel with that and,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
do that as much as you can as
yes,
well.
I do. The Eastern Seaboard's where I get most of my gigs. Pennsylvania, Northern West Virginia, Ohio.
I mentioned to you earlier, the way I look at it, to the world, these people were great country stars.
They were.
But-
That really actually paid their dues. I mean,
Yes.
they, like I said, riding in a car sleeping on a bass guitar, and not to sound like mama, but these people today, I got to pay my dues. Well, what does that consist of?
Right.
Getting in your car and driving to the Opry. I don't know. And I don't know anybody on the Opry anymore but Vince Gill, Bill Anderson, Jeannie Seeley. I mean, that's about all I know
Absolutely.
that's there anymore. I don't know who these other people are, but they introduce them with 17 #1 records. I couldn't tell you one song they do. Whereas if you hear a Hawkshaw Hawkins song, that's a Hawkshaw Hawkins song. If you hear a Gene Shepard song,
Right.
They all, to me, nothing personal. I love you guys, but y'all all sound alike. And y'all all
Exactly.
write the same kind of music, and each song sounds like
Yeah.
the other one. And let's talk about Daisy Dukes, campfires, and bonfires, and
Exactly.
let's get past that. My God.
And they-
Now, have y'all seen the Ken Burns documentary?
Yes. Yes.
Wow, now that was so cool. Hawk had a sister named Lena who lives in Huntington, and we just lost her last year. She was 99.
Oh my word.
And Ken Burns was so kind that she was in a nursing home, and he sent a representative all the way from Maryland down to Huntington, West Virginia, and we went into the facility meeting room or whatever, and he had like a 1-hour segment of my mom and Hawk, and right there where it ends at the crash. And they got 2 of my aunts, actually. I've got a younger aunt up there that she would have been 87, I think. But they brought her up, they brought them all in and made a big deal out of it, and they got to watch this hour-long thing, and when it went fade to black, when Hawk and Patsy got killed, my aunts just, whoa, they went crazy, crying, and
That was probably the best thing I've ever seen on country music.
And he sent me 2 copies, 2 DVDs, and he sent me also 2 of these big, huge books that's word for word of the documentary.
Wow.
Hardback books. And he was a nice guy. He paid me for those pictures that they had. He didn't have to do that. I would have gave him, but he sent this lady down here to give me some money. And
wow.
Ken Burns is great. And when they did the unveiling of the video, they did it at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville. And Jeannie Seeley called me. It was 7:30 or so. And she's like, "Hawk, why ain't you here?" I'm like, "Well, I didn't know anything about it." Well, evidently Ken Burns didn't know anything about country music. And then he read the story of Harold Hawkshaw Hawkins, how he went to the Philippines and served, done 2 tours. Then went to Germany and France, fought in the Battle of the Bulge, and got a total of 4 war stars. Came home, had a son, went and did a show. Wife was pregnant, got killed, and he started crying. And he said, "When I read this story, this is what made me do this documentary."
Well, I tell you what, I am so grateful for you to come and spend the time with us today to do this and to give us the stories. Hawkshaw Hawkins Jr.
Thank you so much, guys.
I hope you all enjoyed today's vlog. If you did, please take a moment to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to this channel. It is so important for us to remember those who came before us and paved the way for those who have since become successful in the country music industry. Hawkshaw Hawkins was one of the most fascinating entertainers of the time. If you weren't familiar with Hawk, go listen to his music. He was truly one of a kind.